Hey, I'm glad you made it so far already in your science experiment choice. Now we're going to do a quick review of what the lab report looks like. So you're all going to have something that looks a bit like this. Everybody has the same one, and there's about 6 or 7 parts to it. So let's go through it. The first part is the science question. And that's a question that starts with a why or how. Now, sometimes people might confuse this with a hypothesis. Hypothesis usually is a statement. But we're going to go with a science question. It's a little bit easier to formulate one. The challenging thing is that we're actually working backwards. You've already got your experiment, now you need to get a science question that matches it. Often scientists, people, will ask that question from the very beginning, saying, how could I make a car go faster? Why does that airplane stay in the sky? And then they develop tests to figure those things out. We're kind of working backwards. So for the sake of this example, I'm going to use something called the paper building experiment. And all it requires is just a stack of recycled paper. So you can get that, or your teacher will probably set you up with them. Each group of 2 or 3 people gets 20 sheets of paper. And then a piece of tape that your class agrees upon is a suitable amount. So 1 meter, that's a good amount. Not too much, but hopefully enough. Okay. So to start out this experiment, I would say look at a picture. Okay, this is how you're going to start this. Look at a picture of a skyscraper. Okay, and think about a question. Formulate a question about the building's ability to stand. Okay, now remember we're going backwards a bit in time because I already have an experiment I want you to do. So my question might be, why don't towers fall down? How does weather affect buildings? How can towers be built taller? Right? Those are science questions. They're quite general. We'll get more specific later, but each of those is a why or a how question. Once you have one, write it in that space on your sheet. The next question we come to right there is the procedure or the test. What are you actually testing? And we got to get more specific. So back to this building idea, my paper building. I might say, does the weight of a building affect its height? Now I want to get really specific. So I'm going to say, does the weight of the base of the building affect its height? That might be one question. Or I might say, do building materials affect a building's height? Again, let's get more specific. What if I say, does the diameter of a paper pillar affect the height of a building? I'm getting very specific, right? That helps me. Once you get one of those questions, put it in. So it's basically, how does something affect something? You got to figure it out. Be specific as you can. Once you get that done, you're on to the actual observation part of your test. The big part of observations is to do it safely, right? So you're going to use your 5 senses, your eyes, which might need goggles, your ears, maybe earmuffs if you're doing something really noisy or a lot of noise over a period of time. For hot and cold, you might need a pair of gloves to protect your touch. Smell, that's a good thing. Often it's safer than taste. But keep in mind, some experiments need to be done outside where you can have some fresh air around you. Taste observations, make sure you know all the ingredients that you're using in your experiment and know that they're all safe. Okay? Now, apart from 5 senses, you can also record your observations using numbers, using tables, using charts and graphs. Use a sheet like Excel or Sheets, and that can help you gather your information and help you to see patterns and then use it later in your report. That's observation. That takes us to the other side of my sheet. Might be the same as yours though. This is where we do retest. Now, the retest is when you actually think about changing one little thing in your study. Now, I was curious about the diameter of the paper pillars I was using. For my single variable, the one changeable thing, I might say, well, what if I rebuilt it using 20 sheets of paper, using 1 meter of tape, but this time I'm going to make my diameter only 2 centimeters instead of 7, how it was before. That's my one variable that's going to change. I'm then going to retest my whole theory and figure out, was my building taller with the 7 millimeter diameter tubes? Was it smaller? Or maybe there was no change, no noticeable change, and it was basically identical. That's okay too. It might seem like a failure, but it's not. You figured something out. You figured out that diameter might not have any effect at all. Okay? So do a retest, record your data again, so that's more observations. And you could do a retest and observations again, not just once. You could do a retest, retest 4, 5, 6 times. You could also gather data from other groups that you're working with who might do the experiment exactly the same, but also change only one variable. Gathering their information might allow you to have a richer, well-developed conclusion and discussion later on in your report. Okay? We've got 2 steps left. Let's keep going. Last one, second to the last, is your results and conclusion. Now, this is where you're going to share your results, and I'm wanting to relate this to my science question. So remember, right back up top, my science question was about do building materials, specifically the diameter of the paper, affect the building's height? Well, with all my data and all my observations, now I might be able to actually say, yes, they do. The bigger the diameter, maybe it's more stable, maybe it's less. Or I might also say, based on my observations, the diameter of the paper tube doesn't affect the height at all. Now keep in mind, I just made this shape. When you build your tower, you don't have to build tubes. Keep that in mind. I've seen people build open sheets. I've seen them build V shapes. I've seen them build squares. I've seen them twist them, make like funny arches. I just picked tubes as an example, so don't get locked in. There's probably about 100 ways to build a paper tower, okay? Anyway, your conclusion needs to connect to your opening science question. How do the building materials affect the height of the building? And that's where you make a comment. The last section, this is the discussion. And this is where you might say, do these results make sense? You say, when the tubes became too large, they actually stopped working. We didn't really expect that. Maybe something else in the room happened, like a fan turned on or the window was open. And you said, we think this might have happened, but the wind was causing it really a hard time to gather good data. That's worth noting in your discussions, okay? Also within your discussion is where you can pick up a few of these extension questions. This is where you're going to stretch your mind out and think about the importance of what you just did in the bigger picture. It may have caused you to do other experiments or experiment in different ways, and just think about some really big science questions. So extension questions, they will fall into your discussion section. And there it is. That is the lab report. That's a basic how to write it. I would suggest give this a try. 20 sheets of paper, 1 meter of tape, have a contest with people in your class, see how they build it. Give yourself, 10, 15 minutes. Do a rebuild. Do the whole thing and practice it using this format. So everybody can have the same go, learn how to do it, Then take the experiment that you just got assigned, right? You'll be a pro. Get it going. Pull out that lab report sheet. This will be the second time you've done it. It'll be easy. You got it. All right? Good luck.